Well, hello. Eric here for the Guitar Rack. Welcome back to the channel. Got a really special time for you today. We are going to be talking about the PRS Custom 24. So grab a drink, get comfortable. It's about to get super nerdy up in here. All right, so PRS Custom 24, very special place for me as a musician and a guitarist with these models. Those that know me, those that have kind of followed the Guitar Rack for a while, seen the pictures, know that I have a bit of a soft spot for PRS. And the Custom 24 easily sits within the top two models for me. So on this journey of the Guitar Rack and all the amazing guitars that I've got to try and own over the years, I've been very fortunate and it's really humbling, all the amazing Custom 24s that I've been able to collect and keep and play over the years. And what I'd like to do here today is share those with you. Go through the models, talk through the years, talk through the changes, the specs, how the guitar has evolved over the years. And hopefully you guys enjoy that and get to learn from all that I've learned and all that I continue to learn from this model. To start, it's really important to think through where the Custom 24 came from, and where I'd like to start is just talk about general, what is it that makes a Custom 24 a Custom 24? If you watch any videos of Mr. Paul Reed Smith talking about kind of the genesis of this model of the 24, you'll quickly put together, and you'll hear him say in many different ways, he really set out to just make a better guitar, take the good things of the major brands at the time, obviously Gibson, Fender being the two legacy brands that were owning the market at the time, take the best and obviously change some things that were really not working for him. So we'll start with some of the very foundational specs on this guitar. Flipping over to the back, you have a mahogany body with a set mahogany neck, obviously taking a play from Gibson in this case, but a very traditional setup and wood combination that has obviously continued in the guitar industry due to how much it just works. Coming over to the front, you have a carved maple top. PRS obviously brought some more, generally known for bringing some of the more flashier maple tops, and you'll see that as we continue through here. But the carve that you get on a PRS guitar, not only is it one of the most comfortable ones that I've played, but it's just stunning to look at. You kind of see how the light hits a PRS and the different contours. It's a beautiful design. We continue on to the headstock. Really a lot going on here that I think take for granted as you look through the design history of different guitars. Straight string pull is the first important thing. Gibsons, unfortunately, in many cases suffer from tuning stability. And what Paul was able to do is capture a headstock design, which I think many consider kind of the next famous traditional design. I personally love the PRS headstock, but there's a lot of functionality here. You have a 3x3 design that pulls the strings much straighter than a Gibson guitar. And also, that headstock is slightly tilted back, so you get the straight string pull of the 3x3 design. Obviously, Fenders have straight string pull as well, but by tilting it back this way, you avoid string trees, you get the appropriate down pressure on the nut, which is really key to tuning stability, the sustain and overall tone of the guitar. Absolutely love this design, and it was Paul. Paul obviously knew what he was doing. We'll talk a little more about some of the specifics up here later. As we continue, you have a 10-inch radius, a bit of a Goldilocks thing here, where traditionally Fenders were 7.5, a much rounder radius, and Gibsons were a little flatter, 12 inches. PRS is 10 inches, and obviously something that is trademark to these guitars. Next, the 25-inch scale. Once again, a bit of an in-between here. Where Gibsons traditionally are on the shorter side with 24 3/4, and Fender had the longer scale length of the two with 25.5. PRS sits in between, and all these things together make this that unique instrument that sets apart from both of them in the end, even though some of the specs sit in between. PRS has always had proprietary hardware. We'll talk about some of those details as we talk through the different models in the evolution, but it is a dual humbucker guitar with electronics that generally bring more versatility than was typically known in your traditional two humbucker guitars coming from Gibson. So again, we'll talk through those details a little more as we go. So now that we've covered the general specs of the Custom 24, and this was really the right guitar to get started with, I'd like to speak about this one specifically. This is a very special instrument. This is a 1986 Custom 24. Just over the 1,000th guitar built in PRS production. PRS started these in 1985. This is I guess a second year of production, in this case being a 1986. And what I will say, and we'll talk about this throughout this video as I go through the models, kind of my opinion of the evolution of these guitars. But if you get a chance to play one of these early ones, I recommend you do so. There's definitely something very special to them. Not to say they're better or worse, or they're different. And there's definitely some mojo in these, in that you will not capture in another Custom 24, in my opinion. But let's talk about some of the specs that set these aside, that really, how is an 86 different? So we'll start at the headstock. Phase 1 locking tuners on these earliest guitars is the first iteration of Paul's proprietary design, with the winged locks on them, actually marked from Germany, made by Schaller for these very earliest ones. Another signature thing for these early PRS, the small script logo. That's something that went into the early 90s. We'll kind of see that as we continue. And a shallower headstock angle on these early models as well. If you actually grab an earlier PRS, I think looking up, you will notice pretty quickly the headstock tilt back is definitely not as aggressive as PRS eventually settled on. Again, just a minor change, but as we're covering all the details, Brazilian rosewood fretboard. Obviously a very sought after wood in the guitar industry, very hard to find nowadays, but these earlier ones came with them stock. Signature birds, that's Paul's thing, and I've absolutely come to love them. As you get over here to the electronics, you have the standard treble and bass pickups. Very sought after. These are the early pickups from PRS, and absolutely, it's another unique sound that you can't get from any of their other pickups. Really enjoy these. Continuing on to the electronics. This is the original PRS configuration here. One volume, a sweet switch, really a fixed tone that we'll talk about in a second, and a 5-way rotary. Obviously not much to say about the volume, but the sweet switch. You have a normal setting, and you have a setting that was designed to mimic the tonal effects of a long cable run. So some of the high-end roll-off and other things. Really cool idea. Two really good fixed settings of tone rather than the full range, and again, something that makes these guitars unique for these years. The 5-way rotary, I'm sure we could have a fun discussion, hopefully in the comments, if you guys want to tell me what you think of these. Some love them, many don't like them. I've honestly come to just accept them for what they are. This was an idea to bring more versatility to a dual humbucker guitar, and there are some fantastic tones within these 5 increments on this switch. The combinations you can get with these pickups specifically on that 5-way rotary, I wouldn't have it any other way. So yeah, that covers everything up on the front. And the last thing to say, these early PRS guitars do have a smaller neck heel, and it does make a difference. So here it is, guys, 1986 Custom 24. I hope you enjoyed it, and let's continue going on through PRS history. So here we are in 1988. Specs are still very similar. You see on this guitar, everything is overall, for all intents and purposes, the same as the guitar prior. You have the same electronics, same pickups, same bridge, same headstock design, all those details. However, what you see here in front of you is a standard 24. In these years, PRS, in these early years, also introduced the standard model, which took away the maple top and made a guitar with a one-piece mahogany body and the mahogany set neck. So you have an all mahogany PRS. Those that enjoy standard 24s know these just have a different vibe to them. They resonate differently, they sound different, and this was just another option that PRS offered at the time. You could get one with the really fancy maple top, or you could get one with the all mahogany body. So here you have it, standard 24, and again, just another option available in these early years with all the other typical early PRS specs. Let's move on to the next one. So as PRS went into the late 80s, even into a bit of the early 90s, they started offering some limited runs. Again, keeping the specs the same. You're still working around the same core Custom 24, but starting to just change some things up to offer unique things to the market. So what you see here is a signature model. This is an 89 signature, and what this model is, again, keeps the core specifications of the Custom 24, being the electronics, the sweet switch, the standard treble and bass pickups. But what you got here was in this case, this guitar actually got a tremolo up route, which, as you know, gives a little more motion to the tremolo. And these guitars were hand signed by Paul on the headstock and hand numbered. So some very unique tops. As you can see, this one actually comes with a killer quilt, and this was one way to just get a slightly extra special PRS in those early years. If you can hunt down one of these signature models from the late 80s, early 90s, I really recommend it. This thing's beautiful. Still get the Brazilian rosewood, still get those coveted treble and bass pickups, still get the sweet switch, but you can get a killer top and have Paul's hand signature on the headstock. So super cool guitar in history of PRS, and one that I really wanted to share with you guys and cover. So let's move on to the next one. All right, next guitar takes us to 1991. This is a very important year in PRS production because we started seeing some changes, or really some phasing out of some of the specs that were really stable through the 80s, late 80s into the very early 90s. Here you see a 1991 Custom 24, and again, it looks, for all intents and purposes, just like a guitar from those prior years that we were talking about. All the core specs: you have the standard treble and bass pickups, you have the sweet switch, you have the 5-way, the volume, the original phase 1 locking tuners. But this is where these specs started changing. The sweet switch started getting phased out after this, and this is probably one of the latest guitars that I've personally had where it was still on the guitar and available like that from the factory. The other important spec is the Brazilian rosewood fretboard. This was the last year that it was still offered in production, then PRS started phasing it out as a standard spec. Obviously Brazilian rosewood is still available, but it becomes much more limited. For limited runs, artist packages, we'll talk about that. You still have all the other core specs. You have the small heel. We already talked about the headstock and whatnot. So absolutely stunning guitar and a critical transitional year. So if you can get your hands on one of these early 90s PRS, this is a great way to get the tones, the feel of those 80s ones for a smaller price tag in all reality. These do not command quite as much as the 80s PRSs. So great buy here. If you can get your hands on one of these, highly recommend it. Let's keep going. So we are now all the way to 1993. Here is a 1993 Custom 24, and you see here come in some specs that really set the stage for a long run of the Custom 24 lineage. So the changes here. As you can see, the sweet switch is gone. We are now to a 3-knob configuration that really held with PRS through and really into the 2000s. And you'll see that through some models as we go. You have volume, tone, and yet again, that 5-way rotary. Love to hear what you guys think about that one. Again, I've kind of come to deal with it, even for its sometimes more annoying stuff. Next major change, the pickups. Standard treble and bass have phased out. 93, I don't think I've seen one where the pickups have come from the factory. We are now into HFS and vintage bass pickups, hot, fat, and screams, and vintage bass. A different take on pickups, HFS being a very hot ceramic pickup, vintage bass being a more traditional neck pickup. This is the tone that's set the Custom 24 for a very long time. Some love them, some hate them. I think the pickups have really come to be appreciated again over the years as people have really accepted them for what they are. This is what made the Custom 24 tone for a long time after. A lot of other specs are still quite similar. You still have the one-piece bridge, you still have the small neck heel, you still have a small script logo with phase 1 tuners. So the guitar still is keeping a lot of the specs that align with a older style, many say vintage now PRS, except that you've changed the electronics. You are now on an Indian rosewood fretboard, and you have obviously changed the pickups. So important step in PRS. This is kind of a step towards the future, but obviously leaving behind it some of those things that people really want to get to truly experience the original PRS. So this is kind of a tipping point you saw between 91 and 93. And what can you say about a just flat black Custom 24? I mean, you love it. Next guitar. All right. So we're still in 1993 here. I bring out another 1993 Custom 24 here to highlight some of the other spec differences that start kind of phasing in as this guitar grew in the industry and obviously with PRS. So all in all, very similar specs here. The electronics have changed. Don't worry about these are more these are future PRS knobs that I put on this guitar specifically, but the bridge has changed. You won't see it on the camera here, but this is a two-piece bridge. You have 3 screws that attach the base plate to the block itself, and while these are still being made to the same design, that is a two-piece rather than the one-piece man-made trim that really made some of those early guitars sought after. Pickups are the same. Again, we're at East Indian Rosewood. Everything at the headstock is the same, but neck carve. So where traditionally Custom 24s have had a lot of wide thin has been a very traditional neck carve for PRS. This guitar carries a standard neck carve, slightly bigger neck, rounder. Something to consider as you look through PRS guitars. They generally carry 2 neck carves across the years, a thin or a standard. Those evolved a bit over the years, and we'll talk about that as we get into different models, but those are for the most part your 2 options unless you find some sort of an odd one-off limited model or something. But some more changes and another stunner of a guitar. Here you have a pretty gorgeous 10 top, and yeah, let's keep going. All right, so here we are now at 1998 with this gorgeous pearl white standard 24. This guitar highlights one more minor transition that, since we're getting super nerdy here, I'll go ahead and get to. In about 1994, PRS transitioned to their final headstock angle. So this being a 98 compared to the ones we looked at prior at 93, this guitar has a slightly more tilted back headstock, which is what PRS takes through to even today. Otherwise, the specs here into this PRS represents for the most part what PRS did into the early 2000s. You still have your phase 1 locking tuners. You would still have the same configuration here, but what I would highlight here is you have a typical mod that many PRS players will go through, where you typically have a volume, tone, and the 5-way rotary. This is switched to McCarty switching, which is volume, tone with a push-pull, and a 3-way toggle. A little more stage friendly, I'll say. Obviously quick switches with this type of a 3-way, but that's a very easy change if this is something you prefer. Otherwise, the specs here continue. You still have your proprietary bridge, you have your HFS vintage bass, but you have on starting at about 1994, a larger neck heel. This is, again, we highlighted this through 93, where the neck heel stayed small. In 94, and this being a 98, you have a larger neck heel here on the back. So something to keep in mind. Not a huge preference for me, to be honest, but some people really like that, a little less material up here as they go up to the high frets. So keep that in mind. That is one change that happens here. So absolutely awesome guitar. If you ever get a pearl white in person, I recommend it. It's a stunning finish that it's really hard to capture in video. But hope you enjoyed this one. Let's keep going. All right, so we were all the way up to 1998 with the prior Custom 24. This one is a 2007. So again, there's a transition point here I want to highlight. In the early 2000s, and about 2001 is when PRS started phasing out the phase 1 locking tuners. And what you see here out in 2007 is phase 2 locking tuners. So these get rid of the winged cam function, and instead you have thumb screws that lock down the strings. Generally, many tend to prefer these. They're definitely a little easier to work with. You don't have to know kind of the trick for working the wing mechanism, but all in all, this is a change that, again, steps through PRS history. These guitars otherwise, again, stay very, very similar. You have the HFS vintage bass pickups, you have the Indian rosewood fretboard, you have the headstock angle that has kind of settled out, you have the larger heel on the back. And this guitar actually came stock with, again, the five-way rotary that continues to stay the same on this design through these years, even into the 2000s. I, again, on this one, decided I wanted to have the three-way toggle, so went ahead and made that change. But as you can see, the Custom 24 stays very stable, and this one is platinum. I love platinum. Absolutely awesome PRS color. I'm sure some of you guys will tell me how much you love it too, but here it is for you. Enjoy it. Let's get to the next one. All right, gonna do a little time travel here because you have some hybrid specs here, and I wanted to make sure we spoke to some of the transitions. But what you have here is a Stoptail Standard 24. So this is actually a 1998. What I want to highlight here, as you've seen in all the guitars so far, Custom 24s very traditionally come with the tremolo bridges. It was the design from the beginning, and it's something that still holds on to the design to this day. In very small quantities here and there, PRS has sent out some 24 fret models with the hardtail bridge, the wraparound Stoptail. What I would say is if you can get your hands on one of these, do it. There are standard 24s out there with the hardtail. There are custom 24s out there with the hardtail. They are definitely unique and they're amazing instruments. The attack and the immediacy of the hardtail bridge definitely makes a difference. And it's a different playing experience by how your palm interacts with either the tremolo bridge or this wraparound tailpiece. I probably will change this one to an adjustable as I kind of settle out on the final tuning for it, but absolutely love this guitar. The specs otherwise are Custom 24, right? This is a larger heel, again, since it's all the way out in 98, and I went ahead and upgraded the Phase 1 tuners to Phase 2. But all in all, you have a 24 fret model, but the difference being is they're hard to find, but you can find them without a trem. So if there's a chance that you maybe don't like the trem or you don't want to bother blocking the trem, these exist. And if you like PRS, you should definitely try to find one. Amazing instrument. Let's keep going. All right, undoing the little time jump detour. We are going from 2007 that we saw on the Platinum to 2008. This is a limited 5708 Custom 24. And the thing to highlight here is PRS did do and continues to do limited runs of their guitars. So what you have here is a Custom 24 that, again, core specs are going to be very, very similar, right? You have your traditional headstock. We're still in Phase 2 tuners. You have the bridge. This one actually came from the factory with McCarty switching, which around these years PRS started doing. You know, the five-way wasn't always best accepted, as we've discussed, so in certain areas they started offering guitars with the three-way McCarty switching. So this one came from the factory this way, and also to accept the 5708 pickups, which were not compatible with the five-way rotary. But here's just an example of some of the different things that PRS does. You have a change in the bird inlays here as well that I should highlight. These are called Jaybirds. Some people call them skeleton birds, but essentially it's an outline of the bird inlay. Great highlight here, great time in PRS history, one of my favorite guitars. Let's keep going. All right, unfortunately going to do one more time jump on you, but I think it's the appropriate time to highlight one more difference in the lineage of the 24 fret PRS models. So we've talked about the Custom 24 and the Standard 24, and those, as you've hopefully seen from all the way in 1985, we've seen examples all the way through 2008, essentially late 2000s. The spec is very stable. A lot of the major things have not changed. There are obviously changes in some of the hardware, some of the evolution of the pickups, but there is one more thing across those years that we need to highlight to really cover all the details. And before oh, Eric, you have another Platinum, we are talking about the CE-24. The USA bolt-on version of the Custom 24. So The CE actually goes as far back as the 80s, and I don't have an example that early, but you'll see some guitars that actually say PRS electric on the headstock. In the late 80s, PRS brought forward a bolt-on option of the 24. And the important thing to note is this is a full-blown USA PRS, these early CE-24s. Full carves, same hardware, same electronics, same neck carve, the core is exactly the same. The only difference being a bolt-on maple neck. So really, I've always been one to squish out that misconception. This is not a cheaper version because it doesn't have a set neck. This is offering to those that want a maple neck with the characters of a bolt-on guitar. This one actually came with covered HFS vintage bass pickups, which are quite a bit harder to come by, but they exist. But no birds. CEs were much harder to come by with birds, and we'll actually talk about that in a second. But here you have dot inlays. Killer guitar, actually a very rare matching headstock on this one. Love this guitar. Let's keep going. All right, so staying on the track of CEs, we just saw a 1996 CE-24. Here's another early one. This is a 1995. The difference here to highlight, and believe it or it looks like my camera's picking this up as almost blue. This is an emerald green CE-24. Again, the full-blown USA version, full USA hardware, full USA carve, just the bolt-on model, and bird inlays. These were very, very hard to get with birds on the CE model. It's very infrequently that you would see these. They typically come with dots, but this is one of those rare offerings. Killer guitar, and another step in PRS history. And it's important to highlight some of these differences here. PRS recently re-released the CE in 2016. And amazing guitars, you know, a USA CE-24, but they are different than what these original CEs were. This CE and the one you saw before, again, has the exact carve, the exact shape, the exact electronics, the exact hardware as the core guitars for these years. The new CE models that were reissued in 2016 have a simpler carve. They have some import hardware on them. They do get the USA pickups for the time, but again, some slight differences. These were the full-blown bolt-on USA Custom 24 experience in my mind. I've always appreciated these. This is a bolt-on version of a USA Custom 24. No question about it. So yeah, another great example with those killer bird inlays. Let's keep going. All right, gonna round off the CE-24 timeline with a bang and kind of bring us back to the proper PRS timeline. So this is a 2009 PRS CE-24. 2009 was actually the last year where these full USA CE-24s were still in production. This specific one was a very limited run for a Japanese dealer with some very, very unique woods, as you can see. A Koa top, a gorgeous flame maple neck, but at its core, it is that full-blown USA CE-24. Bolt-on neck, otherwise all specifications the same. And again, 2009 was the last year of these. So if you can get your hand on one of these older CE-24s, if you like the bolt-on design and what that brings to a guitar, these are fantastic guitars, amazing value. Hope you enjoy. Let's keep going. All right, guys, hopefully you're enjoying this. We've obviously covered a lot of guitars so far, covered a lot of PRS history, but we've got a bit more to go. This guitar right here takes us to 2012. And again, before we get into exactly what this guitar is, there's another transition here that I want to highlight and some specific specs that we'll talk about. So as you've seen, PRS has stayed, again, pretty stable throughout all these years. And in 2008, we started introducing through limited runs some different pickups, like the 5708 model that you saw just earlier. So in 2011 is where PRS kind of took a next step and took some changes to the PRS Custom 24 line, and first being the 5-way blade. I look at this as kind of a hybrid, kind of a best of both worlds between the 5-way rotary and the 3-way toggle. By having the blade, you get really quick access to the sounds, really simple to manipulate, but you do get the the additional tone options, with a 5-way blade, much like the 5-way rotary. So again, you bring in the best of both worlds here. With these years, PRS started introducing some of their newer pickups as well. The 5909 became the standard pickup in 2011 for the Custom 24. And here you see actually a set of 5708s again, but we'll talk about that in a second. The other important change, and I'll kind of reveal part of what this guitar is in a way, is tuners. Around this time, PRS introduced the next iteration of their locking tuners, which are the open gear phase 3 locking tuners. They look very similar on the front. You still have the thumb wheel design, but it is a design change and something that kind of continues here. You actually get larger buttons on these tuners, which I've always liked. Really enjoy the feel of these larger tuning pegs. So another change here from 2011 on. This being a 2012, it actually highlights one other thing going on for PRS, the artist package. In years before, in late 90s, early 2000s, there was an artist package, but it was really more of a cosmetics only upgrade. You got a rosewood headstock overlay, you got abalone birds, some of them got a Brazilian board, but not all, and you got gold hardware. In this era, this being the 2012, artist package was very special. As you can see here, where the others they did also do artist tops. This one I feel like they somehow snuck a private stock top onto it. Absolutely stunning tops coming out of artist package in this era, and you got to customize the woods on the guitar. This guitar, for example, is a rosewood neck on a mahogany body. The bare rosewood necks are, if you haven't played one, go. Try. It's a great experience. One of the best feels you'll get on a guitar for that really nice open pore rosewood. This one also has an ebony fretboard, and those are some of the options that you can have. Change in neck wood between rosewood and maple, or mahogany, of course, but there's some amazing flame maple necks coming out of artist package in these years. And the fretboard wood, Brazilian rosewood, ebony, or flamed maple. Really, with this year of artist package, and that has continued into the future years, as you'll see even till today, you can really put together a highly customized PRS guitar and really bring the specs over the top. Absolutely gorgeous instrument, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, and we have made it to the last example of the PRS Custom 24 Evolution that I have for you guys out of my collection. Appreciate you guys sticking around, and I hope you've enjoyed this. This is a 2015 PRS Custom 24, and I apologize, it's a chameleon shifting metallic finish that the green somehow seems to be acting as a green screen, and I have no idea how I just got a custom brick finish, but apparently it's going to be a brick guitar. So this year, I think, kind of highlights some of the final things that PRS has done over these later years as they evolve their guitars. With the 2012, and we talked about that 2011 transition to the blade and the Phase 3 tuners, the core items have stayed. PRS continues to use the blade, though in the 35th anniversary, for example, one of their most recent limited offerings, they added the 2408 switching to the Custom 24. But ultimately, this is just one example of the changes. In 2015, they introduced the 8515 humbuckers, a new version of the lineage of 5708s, 5909s, 5310s. Here you have the 8515s. Amazing pickup, just a great next tonal evolution for the Custom 24. And this, being a 30th anniversary model, also obtains a really awesome unique bird inlay together with the purfling both on the neck and the headstock. So you have these sort of minor evolutions, I'd say, over the years as PRS continues. But again, those changes that happened still continue, and you have another great guitar from this history. So let's tie it all together, shall we? All right, so we've seen a lot of PRS Custom 24s today. Honestly, I love these instruments. They're very inspirational to play, and that's the reason why I've kept the ones that you've seen here. There's something special to them, and I really respect, and I feel very lucky to be able to be in a time where Paul has built these guitars and continues to evolve these guitars and get to live through this happening. And I hope you guys get to experience something similar. So looking at these two together, starting from the 1986, you know, the very early Custom 24 to this 2012 that represents some of the more recent specs from PRS. My final thoughts, you know, the heart and soul of the Custom 24 has been very stable. These guitars feel very, very similar. I will tell you, you pick up this one or you pick up this one, it still feels like a Custom 24. And to be honest, I feel like that pays testament to the fact that Paul got it right early on. He knew he wanted to make some changes. He was bringing something different to market, and this is what came out of it. And it has continued to evolve. Paul is always refining, always making his craft better, and you see those refinements here. All in all, you will get a slightly different playing experience with them. There's these old ones have more variability to them. There's more of a hand-built feel to them, and obviously these weren't hand-built per se. There's definitely production techniques that were applied to these as they started going into production in '85, but still. You can see some of those nuances in these early models, and there's a mojo to it that I really appreciate playing. Now, in this 2012, you can clearly tell that they have continued to refine the production. They've honed it in, and it is a fine-tuned machine. Both amazing instruments, great history to these models, and I hope I will get to play them for many years to come. You know, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you'd like to hear more about these guitars, hear some tones from these guitars, have any questions about PRS, shoot them in the comments. Let's talk. I'd love to talk more about PRS Custom 24s. If you want to hear any of these guitars specifically, you want to hear some comparisons, I'd be happy to shoot those videos for you. So shoot me some comments. Let me know what you'd like to see, and we will continue to grow this channel together. Eric from the Guitar Rack. Take care.